would join in. Old McCall had a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
Hey guys, welcome in. Good to see you. We're reviewing 2 episodes today from All Engines Go. We're reviewing Counting Cows and Music is Everywhere. These are episodes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, episodes 12 and 13 of season 1. A little bit behind there. I know it's gone over like in 4 seasons already, but it's good to see you. Welcome in. So let's go ahead and talk about each of these episodes. Now, this first episode, very straightforward. Gordon says, Thomas, I need you to go ahead and take these cows over to McCall's farm. Percy helps out, and, they lose track of the cows. They're supposed to take 10 cows. They got problems with their gates. They lose all the cows. Thomas decides that he's going to go a little crazy on this tractor. I mean, like, this is like one of the most egregious I wouldn't say errors, but sins of an episode, because it's just Thomas doesn't quite look like an engine in this. Looks more like, a person, which Thomas is not, right? Thomas is an engine. And so that's kind of the surprise here is Thomas being a little silly. And then they find the cows and everything is good, right? So very straightforward. It's very straightforward kind of episode in terms of how it's supposed to go. But there are some good things about this episode. And first off, one of the things that I want to say that it does very well when it talks about is it's important to, hey, we got to be productive, right? Sometimes we have a job to do. We have something that we need to accomplish, and we can't let other things distract us. And I know that's definitely true, something that kids need to learn, but honestly, it's a lesson that sometimes adults need to learn too, right? How many times have you said, like, hey, I need to do something, right? I need to, get my work done, get my homework done, pay my taxes, do my chores, do the laundry, but instead you're distracted by saying, like, oh, I want to play, one more round of this game, or I want to finish watching, this baseball game, or I want to finish watching my TV show, right? These are all fun things that we like to do, but they may not necessarily be the most productive thing to do and result in problems down the line. So it's a good reminder to say, hey, you know what? We gotta focus, right? The other thing is that it does something that's really clever, and it gives you a productivity tip. So in the episode, they say, hey, you know what? Why don't we play a game? Why don't we make this job that we're trying to do into a game, right? Where they're trying to find the cows, right? And in the particular game that they're using this time is I Spy, right? Why don't we use I Spy to try and find the cows, and locate them? And that's a great idea, right? Making one of the biggest productivity tips that we've seen is to make something that you don't want to do into a game, right? A good example is, let's say that you need to have a series of chores you need to do, right? You need to do the laundry, you need to take out the trash, you need to wash the dishes, right? Well, maybe you could say, like, hey, you know what? Every time that I do one of my chores, I get a point. And if I get 3 points in an hour, I get to reward myself by drinking this soda. Right? There's a victory condition. You have to have everything done within an hour. If you don't have it done within an hour, you don't win, right? So there's a time limit, there's an objective, right? It makes things a little bit more exciting, a little bit more fun. I'm not saying this method necessarily works for everyone, but for some people, making something into a game, making something fun or entertaining or engaging on that level can make you more productive. There are apps there are apps that you could download on your phone where you could make your chore list, your responsibility list, into a way where you can make it, you can get points for doing it. And I think that's really exciting. I think it's reflected in, generally speaking, in other ways in apps too, right? When you are trying to lose weight, you're tracking your calories, right? Having that number is sort of gamifying, your weight loss. It's also a useful tool to see that you are making progress. But in some ways, it's gamifying. You know how you have apps that you track how many steps you take, and people want to take so many steps. Well, that's sort of a gamified way of doing it. If you want to learn a language, Duolingo does it by sort of making each lesson a something that's more interactive. So what they're doing here in Thomas, right, where they're saying, hey, you know what, we want to make this a game, is reflected in reality and is actually a pretty smart idea. Even though generally speaking, people say, oh, Oranges Go, maybe these are lessons only that kids need to know. I disagree. I think everyone needs to know these lessons. Especially I think that sometimes I think with the world being so crazy sometimes. Maybe we need to really learn these lessons. I do like though that Gordon is singing though. Gordon is singing. This is Neil Crone. He voices Gordon. He also voiced Gordon in Thomas and the Magic Railroad. So if you enjoyed Thomas and the Magic Railroad, which is a movie that a lot of fans really do like, especially if they grew up with Shining Time Station, which I did. I grew up with Shining Time Station. Then Neil Crone's voice would sound both very familiar, and having him sing a song is phenomenal, absolutely. So I think that's pretty good. I don't know if this episode is necessarily to help kids learn to count, because even though they are trying to count to 10, it's not like whenever they're counting, then there's like the cows are numbered, right? They're just counting it little by little. So it's possible that the counting lesson is in there. Oh my gosh, look at this, Thomas just leaping. All Engines Go has cute designs, and I like the colors and I like the background music, but every now and again you just get silly little moments like this where it's sort of like, that's not quite the Thomas that I remember. But still, the art style is very clean, and it makes it nice. So I think there is a counting aspect there that is for little kids, but there's also lessons that other people can learn as well. I truly believe that. So yeah, this is also another one where Thomas says to Gordon, "I Thomas promise," and then he subsequently messes things up. So a Thomas promise is a very dangerous thing to make. I do like that rhymes though. I do like the other rhymes. It's pretty funny. But yeah, generally speaking, it's a decent episode. There's a lot of jumping around. When I say jumping around, I mean engines physically jumping around that I don't necessarily like. But there's not much that you can really kind of do about that. There's only so much that you could do. You could work with that. Okay, let's talk about the next episode. The next episode, which is Music is Everywhere. Now this I think is the better episode of the two. Music is Everywhere is a phenomenal episode. Okay, and there's a number of reasons why. I think that there's like 50 lessons. There's like 50 lessons. No, I think there's like 3 main lessons that you learn in this episode. But mainly, this is an episode where you see Nia is very much into music. And I think that this is, whoever wrote this episode understands Nia, understands these characters, because Nia was fascinated by music previously in the CGI series. When Nia was introduced, Nia was brought up music and singing before. So the fact that Nia loves music in All Engines Go, which is sort of kind of a reboot of the previous CGI and model series, I think is a nice little nod that, hey, Nia is not necessarily maybe not the same character from before, but she has similar traits to the original Nia, and I think that's really fun. It's good. It's not, continuity is the wrong word, but it's a good nod to say, like, hey, all of these engines have personalities. They're all different. They are very distinct individuals, right? You know, Percy has the mail train, and we actually see Percy in the mail train here, right? Nia loves music, right? Kana loves going fast, right? It's good that once, even though All Engines Go is sort of a reboot, it's nice to know that they have, each of these characters have personality traits that define them. They may not necessarily be the same engines or the same characters as we had before, but they're distinct in their own right, and that makes them stand out, right? They're not all cookie cutter versions of each other, right? Diesel is not Thomas. Thomas is not Percy. Percy is not Nia, right? So it makes perfect sense there. But I like a little bit of that reference. But Nia loves music. Sorry, we're just getting off track on what this episode's about. Nia loves music, and Nia is delivering the musicians and the guests to the station. But apparently the instruments, which are coming in a different train, haven't arrived yet. So Tomahat is very worried, and so Nia and Thomas decide to go and find Gordon, who's taking the instruments. They're looking everywhere. They pick up Sandy and Carly, and they pick up Percy. And then eventually they find Gordon, who is stuck behind a bridge. They use the hook to Sandy's hook to help Gordon cross. Everyone is happy. Nia discovers that I think that's a tuba. Fell out. Nia goes to get the tuba, but then she gets trapped. She gets trapped on the bridge. And then Thomas, and by the way, spoilers if you haven't watched this video already, Thomas brings instruments made from various materials, not necessarily actual instruments, but various materials to create music for Nia because she's missing out on the concert. She really wanted to see the concert. Okay. And that's basically the whole story. And honestly, it's heartwarming. That is a heartwarming story, right? How many times have we been disappointed in life, right? There's something that you wanted to see, something you want to do, an activity that you wanted to participate in, and you miss out. Maybe you miss out because you didn't have the money to buy the concert ticket, or maybe you miss out because you had a schedule conflict. You had to do one thing or another, or maybe you missed out because of something completely out of your control. That happens. One time I was trying to attend, I was at Disneyland for a special event, and I wanted to do something called Villains Grove. It's part of an Oogie Boogie Bash event, and it's a beautiful walkthrough filled with lights and colors. But unfortunately, the parade at Disneyland went over, and the park closed while the parade was going on. And so I wanted to try and maybe get to Villains Grove before the park closed, and I was late by about 10 seconds. I was late, and I was told, hey, sorry, this is closed already. You can't come in. If I was there maybe 20 seconds ago, I could have, but I couldn't. And I was very disappointed. It was sort of outside my control, it was sort of in my control, but it was a disappointment nonetheless, right? I was sad that I wasn't able to be there in time and do this part of this event. And, Nia is sad. Nia is sad that she's missing out on the concert. She literally was responsible for delivering the musicians, right? She worked hard to try and make sure that they had their instruments by helping Gordon, and now she's trapped behind this bridge and she can't make it to the concert. So she's sort of, dealing with the fact that something that she was expecting to do, something she was looking forward to, she can't do. She can't do it, and it's not something that she can control. So when Thomas and Percy and Carly and Sandy come and they bring these different materials to make music, right? Which is kind of an interesting song. Let me see if I can find the song here that they're playing. Yeah, that's the song that they're playing. It's kind of neat. It's a neat song. They're doing it to cheer Nia up. They're doing it to cheer their friend up, and I think that is the biggest, the most critical message of this episode. And that is friendship matters. Friendship absolutely matters, right? That in this, when your friend is sad, right? Thomas is like, I'm going to be a good friend. We're going to be good friends. We're going to put on a show for Nia. It may not be the show that she expects, but it is the show that we can give her. It is the show to try to lift her spirits, to bring her a little bit of joy and happiness. And I honestly respect that. I respect that, because we can't always, instead of Thomas trying to do something to get Nia to the concert, which he may not necessarily be able to do, he's providing an alternative way for her to enjoy music, which she loves. Right? And he knows her well enough. He knows Nia well enough that he knows that she will appreciate it, right? He knows that she loves music. And I think that's good friendship. Sometimes we have to overcome adversity by working together. There's the other lessons here. The other lessons here that are worth knowing is, hey, the show must go on, right? Right? Everyone is very worried that the show can't happen, right? Because there's no instruments. So all these engines are working together to help find the instruments, to help Gordon, and to ensure that the show must go on, right? And that things continue. And that's just generally a good lesson for kids, for adults, is that sometimes things just have to, move forward, right? That despite the challenges, the obstacles, the setbacks, you have to keep going. You can't give up. You have to do the best you can with what you're given. And that's not always easy. Because sometimes we want everything perfect. Growing up, I was very much a perfectionist. I wanted everything lined up in a row. And if I didn't have that lined up in a row, I got upset. But sometimes you can't be perfect. Sometimes you have to do what needs to be done. As my mom used to say, Kevin, you got to bend like the bamboo, right? The concert, didn't exactly go off without a hitch, right? The instruments probably arrived a little bit later than the musicians wanted. They probably didn't have the chance to practice or tune their instruments as much as they wanted, be right before the concert. But I bet the musicians continued to play. To put on a show, right? And that's something that's we need to realize. So hey, that's a good lesson. The show must go on, but it's not as big a lesson as friendship. And then the other lesson, the third lesson, and this is kind of an interesting thing that they sort of brought up, is that anything can make music. There's a pretty good example here when they meet Percy, right? And Carly's hook is hitting these fence posts.
How are you, Gordon? What was that noise? It sounded like music.
It sounded like music, right? Percy basically said, the lesson, right? That anything can be used to make music. And that's true. Music is a universal language, right? Every culture in the world has made music. Now, I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm not, but I could be wrong. But every culture in the world has music. They've used it to different instruments. They have different languages. They have different ways of creating this music. But everyone has created music because music is something that we all enjoy, as humans, as humanity. And we can also appreciate music from other cultures as well. And I think that this is a good example that, hey, different objects, different instruments can make different sounds, but music can come from anywhere. Music is everywhere, which is, of course, the name of the episode, right? There's the title drop. Obviously, bands that utilize unique objects to make sounds make full use of this idea. If you have ever heard a cappella group, which is where people use their voices to make sounds, you could definitely hear this out, where people can sound like instruments simply with their voices, right? And that's an amazing talent, right? That's an amazing skill and amazing coordination among all the singers to do that together, right? So I think that's a worthwhile lesson. It's worthwhile to acknowledge that, hey, you know what? There's a lot of potential creativity, a lot of potential music that exists out there, and all it takes is someone or a group of people to unlock it by discovering how to put together these different sounds, these different ideas together in a creative and vibrant way. And I think that's a good lesson here. It's not the main lesson, but it is one that that I think kids would appreciate, right? I don't know if you've ever started, tapping on your desk to make a drum beat, right? But you are basically doing the exact same thing that the engines here are doing, which is really neat. It's a fairly good lesson there. Yeah. I also like that there's certain sections here where we see the engines kind of being engines. I mean, look here where they're hooking up together in order to pull the bridge. Now, I don't think that this is a safe way of getting the bridge down, but hooking the engines up together and pulling, well, that's a pretty standard thing that, engines could do, right? A train can do, right? And engines acting like engines is always a plus in my book when it comes to Thomas and Friends. So that's always fun. There's a nice little shout out for Percy here. Percy's pulling the mail train. So Percy, is responsible for the mail, right? That happened before in the model series. So that's a good kind of reference to that. The Percy that we know here is very similar to the Percy originally. I would like to see, pardon me, guys. I would like to see Sir Topham Hatt being a little bit more in charge, right? Sir Topham Hatt's in charge of the railway. He, everyone knows this, right? Confusion and delay, right? And in this case, he's sort of like, oh dear, what are we going to do? It's a disaster, right?
And Gordon's never late. Never!
If there's no...
So it's sort of like beyond the engines, right? In the scene to sort of take it on their own initiative to solve the issue rather than Sir Topham Hatt saying, hey, this is what needs to be done, right? He's in charge. He's the leader. He should be saying, hey, go find Gordon, go locate him and see what's up, because, he's not here, rather than saying, Nia and Tom saying, oh, we should find Gordon, right? It's a little bit different because it's not quite the characterization of Sir Topham Hatt that we've known before, but the engines have to take more initiative to keep, figure things out, to solve the problem, to keep the things going there. So that's it. This is actually, there weren't a lot of errors or sins at the beginning of this episode, because for a lot of it, it just,
You sure are in a good mood.
it's just Thomas and Nia talking to each other as they ride along the rails, right? Engines. That's a pretty normal train thing to do. It's for the first few minutes there aren't a lot of errors. Engines are being engines. Sure, they're like wiggling a little bit, but I don't mind that too much. The one thing that I want to go ahead and say is where's that crossing? Where's that crossing here? They're using James a lot. James in the crossing a lot. He just appears here. Sorry, you can't see. He just appears all the time crossing. They're crossing the road. James appears. Oh, they're gonna run into trains. This is like the third episode in a row that James has appeared going across a crossing, and that's the only time that he's appeared in the last 3 episodes, going across a crossing. He's not appeared like on a siding or anything. No, he's just crossing in front of these engines. So it's nice to see James again. Right, he's one of the OGs. It's pretty funny that they keep using him in the exact same manner for 3 episodes in a row. Both when they're literally. But they already. I think it's sort of a way for them to save on cost for animation. Because it's him. They've already have him. His assets, and they already have him using the crossing. So if they have him use the crossing again and again and again, they're not really they don't need to probably do as much work as opposed to putting him in a different location. I could be wrong. I'm not an animator. I don't know how that works, but I think that's why we see James at the crossing every single time. It just happens a lot. Also, there's an error here that I will mention in my next everything wrong episode. Where his light's on the other side, right? It's supposed to be on his right, not his left, right? But honestly, this was a solid episode. I really like the idea that friendship matters to Thomas, that friendship matters to all these characters, and I really respect that. And I think we should take that to heart. You know, that Thomas is a good enough friend, that he's going to try and help Nia out, that everyone cares about Gordon, and they're trying to help him out, and they're all supporting each other. They're all supporting each other. And as people, as humans, that's what we should do. That's what we should do. You know. That's love. That's love. Okay, guys. It was good talking with you about reviewing these episodes. This was a lot of fun. Let me know if you have any disagreements about anything I've said in this episode, or if you agree with anything, or if you think that there's something in this episode that I didn't cover, you think I should have covered or mentioned. But these are very solid Orange and Go episodes. I look forward to seeing the next two and reviewing them with you guys. And